we rediscover that the biblical light that existed in the black outer regions of space before it created the 5 billion year old world is talking about 1 John 1:1, 15 billion year old sun throne that created the 5 billion year old world. Now, many astronomers today in high school and colleges around the world is talking about the earth being in existence as a stone or a huge meteor type rock. Now, if astronomers is teaching this to high school 8th graders and college students, then they are in astronomical error, 100% error, because we now see the creation of mass. Anything that occupies space or has length, width, and height is in the 3rd dimension. So the 4th dimension is light, okay, and light is on a higher frequency. So as the Bible narratives of the European Gentile nations made the same astronomical error in the opening verses of Genesis, it speaks of a 5 billion year old earth or rock floating in the black outer regions of space as the Spirit of God hovered over this rock or earth and separates the waters from the dry land. Then paused and turned around and said, "Let there be light." This is another theological and astronomical error in which Laurel Smith from Chicago, Illinois, nonprofit home video and artworks creation, is pointing out in his video that ancient Egypt's solar theology of the black man face upon a lion's body called the Giza Sphinx lion of ancient Judea and Jerusalem. So this is Ezra 1:3, connected to Genesis 49 chapter and 8 verse. Well, the black man face upon a lion's body called the couching Ethiopian lion sphinx of ancient Judaism. He ruled over the entire book of Genesis 2:7, normal African Adamic race, in which populated South Africa to north. Now, if we draw 12 lines from South Africa and to North Africa, east to west horizontal geographic land surface lines, and then view them with satellite imagery, we will see nothing but African tribes living in each of the 12 horizontal land surface lines. And which brings us into the terminology in which I call the original 12 African continent tribe, in which the Giza Sphinx lion in northeast Africa, in front of the Isaiah 19:19 Giza pyramids, ruled over. But in the 16th century, the 1611 King James of England appointed 72 Greek and Hebrew scholars to fly to the Qumran caves. That's the area between Jerusalem and Judea. So this is in northeast Africa, okay, where you see Judea is in the 11th line. Now remember, we have drawn 12 lines from South to North Africa, east to west geographic land surface line. Now Nigeria will appear in the 9th line, okay, whereas the 11th line would be Ethiopia and Sudan. And in that area, we see aerial views from outer space. We see this is the Giza Sphinx, or black man face upon a lion's body. In other words, that's the Isaiah 19:19 aerial view with satellite imagery, pyramid era. So the African face upon a lion's body, called the couching Ethiopian lion sphinx of ancient Judaism, he ruled over the entire African continent from south to north. But this was not told to Afro-Americans in the mistranslated King James Bible. In the European Gentile nations, theological-based racism. Now, as we look at this biblical light of the African Sphinx, we are re-examining the solar theology of Hydren, or the 15 billion year old sun throne that existed in the black outer regions of space before it created the 5 billion year old world. Now, when we do this, we will have to go back to the materialization of light into mass. And now, if we look at an old-fashioned electric heater, you plug it into the wall. The iron coils in the heater, when the negative and positive currents move across the molecules or molecular structure or 3D mass structure of the iron, we see a red hot infrared frequency being generated. Now, this is very important because the same thing is occurring in the center of the blue basketball-shaped Earth. We see a red hot ball of lava, and it's situated between the north and south pole. Now look at the blue basketball-shaped Earth. You're going to immediately notice a donut-shaped magnetic field surrounding the blue basketball-shaped Earth. Now this is where we begin to unravel the mystery of our solar system. Now, many astronomers in high school and college textbooks has not touched on this moving quantized black space field equation. This is where the same black space in which we look up at night and see is being moved or manipulated by a moving quantized black space field equation. Okay, now this is the origin of magnetism. Now, when we look at this, we're going to notice that whenever a magnetic field is broken and reconnected, such as in the old-fashioned 1940 bicycle generators, if you take one apart, you see two magnets with copper wire wrapped around each one of them and the axle going through the magnets. As the wheel rotates the magnets around, we see a broken and reconnected magnetic field, and that is generating an electric plasma charge. Now, if we go back to the sun and outer space, we're going to see a magnetic rotating ball of hydrogen-like plasma that created the world, and we're going to see a donut-shaped magnetic field surrounding the sun. In other words, this is where we pick up discovery data concerning the moving quantized black space field equation, because if you have black space being in existence before the Big Bang, okay, that's wrongfully taught in high school and college textbooks to students. Now, if black space always existed, we can look at that as the eternal continuum of our space-time dimensions. Now, if there is to be a Big Bang, then there is no that created the stars and planets and galaxies, then there is no beginning to what we call black space. It's eternal. Make a note of that. Okay. So as we move forward and realize that when black space moves upon itself, as seen with telescopes in outer space by astronomers, they see a rotating form of black space called a black hole. Now, we do the same thing with touching two tornado-shaped black holes tip to tip. Now, as this occurs in the black outer regions of space, we are looking at a moving quantized form of the black space field equation. And so, to many of my readers or video viewers, they're going to say, well, what's that, Laurel? Well, that's a new element in which astronomers has not touched on or has not put in their science textbook in high school and grade schools and colleges. So as we look at this new form of black space, where actually to us it's a new form because the human race is just dawned upon getting into the electron microscope image of matter. So as we look at this quantized moving black space field equation, we must involve this geometric image. So now as we look at the 3 image, we're going to say, okay, there's a big white 3, and we see it upon a 6-cornered snowflake diagram. Now notice that there's a tetrahedron within the central area of the 6-cornered snowflake. And so we're going to see 5 red dots in the center and 3 green dots on the outside. So you say, well, how did you create a tetrahedron in the North Pole area of the blue basketball-shaped Earth? Well, this is what the 5 Martian pyramids or Sidonian pyramids on Mars, all these pyramids is aligned to the stealth pyramid globe Earth Mercator projection of the black African civilizations of Ham. So this is the Genesis 2:7, normally the African Adamic race that the African thinks ruled over. Now remember, in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, the 105th chapter and 23rd verse, the 12 African continent tribes was illegally renamed as theological racism in the 16th century by King James of England, appointed 72 Greek and Hebrew scholars into the 12 sons of Jacob. So the 12 sons of Jacob is wrongfully credited in the mistranslated English King James Bible textbook as starting ancient Judaism. Although we see the pyramids all around the world connected to the black man's face, moon, and body, and which was denied in theological racism as the origin of Judaism, as he ruled over South Africa to North, the entire African continent. Now, the normally the African Adamic race that populated the African continent is referred to as the 12 African continent tribes. So this is way before the illegal English King James Bible text was created to change the 12 African continent tribes in the book of Psalms, the 105th chapter, 23rd verse, into the 12 sons of Jacob. Now, as we go back to this tetrahedral displacement, arrangement within the North Pole 6-cornered snowflake, you say, well, wait a minute. We are uncovering the mysteries of creation as it deals with a donut or toroidal-shaped rotating magnetic field pulling in a hydrogen-like plasma. Now look at the top of the donut-shaped magnetic field surrounding the Earth. Now you're going to see a downward pointing vortex through the top of the donut and an upward pointing vortex. Now they're going to create the fore. Now look at the fore image. You say, okay, what's that? That fore image is the creation of infrared light into a 3D mass, and that would be the red hot lava core. Now there are 7 rainbow circles in white light. So at the top of the donut-shaped magnetic field, we're going to see a hydrogen-like plasma circle in rotation. It's the same hydrogen-like plasma circle we see rotating around the chemical circular area of the human cell in Microbiology 101. Now the question is, if we look at the origin of the human cell or the circular bacteria cells in the oceans and ground surface level, we would need an electron microscope. And if we take a handful of dirt, we're going to see blue, green, and yellow rotating hydrogen-like circle plasma. Now remember, the 7 rainbow circles that we see at the top of the Earth is the hydrogen light spectrum frequency as hydrogen light passes through a magnetic field. So if we see that this donut-shaped magnetic field is pushing something down into the atmosphere, what is it pushing? Well, this is the hydrogen light spectrum moving to a magnetic field, which creates these 7 rainbow circles. So what created the bacteria cells in the garden, soil, and oceans? Now we're talking about the circular glowing red, blue, green, and yellow bacteria cells. So we see this plasma now, infrared area of the red color of white light. So we have ROY, R-O-Y, which is red, orange, and yellow, and G is green, and BIV, that's the last 3 colors, blue, indigo, and violet. So how do you remember the 7 rainbow circles? Say ROY, G, BIV. Now this red, orange, and yellow is what we see at the top of the Earth, rotating circles of hydrogen-like plasma. Now in the North Pole area, they refer to it as the Aurora Borealis. But as we soon discover that, like a tornado in the atmosphere, if you ever look at your news channel or weather stations and see the satellite image of the top of the Earth, where you see a group of clouds rotating around and around in a funnel shape. And so the tip of the cloud is where the tip of the tornado is. Now that vortex is so powerful that if it moves over a house or a car, it could lift it up into the air. Now in outer space, when black space moves, we see a tornado-shaped rotating form of black space called a black hole. Now when they detonate an atomic bomb in the atmosphere, we also see a tornado-shaped mushroom cloud. So as we look at the power of this rotating tornado-shaped vortex, we go back to the top of the blue basketball-shaped Earth, where it is created at. Now, if we look at something being in rotation before the mass of the Earth was created, we're talking about the fore image. Look at my diagram. You see the donut-shaped magnetic fields, and then you see something moving in through the A area. Okay, that's the top of the tornado-shaped vortex. Okay, now what could be moving in from outer space through that top vortex area or the top of the donut-shaped magnetic field? The only thing that is in outer space that could move is black space itself. Make a note of that. So as we rediscover that there's a moving quantized black space field equation, in which generates magnetic fields. Okay, now we must go back to this tetrahedral formation of molecules. Okay, in the North Pole area. So if you're in the North Pole area of the blue basketball-shaped Earth, you're going to immediately notice that hydrogen, or H2O, water, is frozen into an ice or crystalline structure called a snowflake in the atmosphere. Now we're looking at a 32 pound per square inch pressure at sea level. So that means the same 32 pounds of air pressure you might pump into your car tire or inner tube. It has so much power, it pushes against the inner tube. Okay, in your car tire or bicycle tire. So we're talking about something so powerful that it manipulates magnetic fields. Okay, now you say, wait a minute, wait. So you're telling us that there's a moving quantized black space field equation that created the Earth donut-shaped magnetic field. That's right. Right, remember, if we look at the rotation of the donut-shaped magnetic field, we're looking at two cone-shaped vortex pointing tip to tip. Now in outer space, when black space moves, you see a black hole. It's a tornado-shaped rotating form of black space. Now, if two black holes touch tip to tip, you get a big bang, or the creation of molecular mass and atoms and stars. Okay. Now, if we go back to the movement of quantized black space that created the 5 billion-year-old Earth, then we're talking about the same holy hydrogen-like creation plasma that created the 5 billion-year-old Earth. It too has a donut-shaped magnetic field surrounding the sun. Now, this is where we discover that our sun is burning off of a quantized moving black space field equation. In other words, just like carbon is left after a beach log fire camp, where the oxygen being burnt in the log on a beach campfire, once it depletes the oxygen, the fire, the remaining residue is carbon. Okay, now that is that oxygen depleted from a mass structure will result in a black carbon residue being left. Now, if we look at this black carbon, okay, like you cut open a 9-volt battery, you're going to see black carbon and a zinc rod going through the battery, right, the center of the battery. So these two, carbon and zinc, once the electrons intermingle with one another, we get an electrical charge. Now, if we go back to the Earth, we had something in rotation before the Earth was being formed. And astronomers in high school science textbooks and astronomy textbooks in colleges, they had no clue as to what created the Earth. So therefore, they resort to the Neanderthal thinking approach, which states that the rock called the Earth, or the mantle, right, that's solidified from the red hot lava, the iron and granite big rock was in outer space. So that's all they can talk about, which is sad. Okay. Now remember, I'm a high school dropout, and sometimes I have trouble spelling big words. My knowledge is coming directly from that biblical light that created the world, that it also glows around all the chemical circular area of the human cell. We see it rotating in this holy hydrogen light creation circular plasma form. So this light is knowledge, and the human mind is a magnetic rotating ball of hydrogen light plasma. And they travel across the 93 million miles of black space from Psalms 84:11 sun throne, which is Malachi 4:2 winged Egyptian sun disk. So that's the holy hydrogen light creation in which I speak of in my videos that outranks all the false man-based world religions. And this same hydrogen light is seen going around all the chemical circular area of the human cell, as seen with the electron microscope in Microbiology 101. Now, if we go back to the donut-shaped magnetic field in rotation, now, before the hydrogen light plasma 7-color rainbow spectrum, in which we see at the top of the blue basketball-shaped Earth as the aurora borealis. So this hydrogen light spectrum, the infrared spectrum, is what is being focused through the tip of the tornado-like vortex, moving to the top of the donut-shaped magnetic field, pointing down. And there's a tornado-shaped vortex moving up to the bottom of the donut-shaped magnetic field. Now, where these two tornado-shaped magnetic fields converge in the center of where the Earth is to be formed, we see a discharge of hydrogen-like plasma. And what is that infrared frequency? We see the red light. So of this red rainbow circle being forced through the tip of the tornado rotating magnetic field vortex. So as we see that hydrogen light is how the 3D world was formed, because we see light solidifying into mass, much like an electric heater. Okay, where you have a negative and positive charge of the wire plugged into the wall, and the iron fillings or coils in the heater, 3D mass or molecular structure. When electrons flow into that molecular structure or iron coil, it excites the electrons, and that gives us a red hot glow or infrared glow of the iron in the electric heaters. Now, if you rub two hands together fast enough, you're going to get this same heat being produced by electrons being excited in the molecular structure of your hand or flesh. All right. Now, if we go back to the incorrect scientific approach, in which we read in high school textbooks and college textbooks, in which wrongfully credits the Earth as being in existence in the black outer reaches of space as a huge rock. Okay. This should never be tolerated again in high schools and colleges, because it is mentally brainwashing innocent Afro-American students, as we now see that the biblical light that created the world is the hydrogen light spectrum coming from the sun. And as it is burning off of a moving black space field equation, that's black space in motion. That's what's moving through the top part of the donut-shaped magnetic field that surrounds the sun and the bottom. Now, the same thing is occurring where the Earth is being created. Remember, all the 9 planets surrounding the sun or orbiting around the sun in the black outer regions of space. You can put the sun in the center of the donut-shaped magnetic field. Okay, that means all these planets is orbiting in that donut-shaped rotating magnetic field. That means you can draw a line from the center of where the sun is in the donut out to Mercury. So that would be in the wall of the donut-shaped magnetic field. Then you go to Venus and Earth and Mars. All of these planets, believe it or not, is orbiting inside a donut or inner tube, a huge magnetic type of like inner tube. So this would give you a visualization of the orbits of the planets around the sun. They are orbiting around a donut-shaped rotating magnetic field. Now, if we look at the Earth materializing from a donut-shaped magnetic field, then we have solved the moving quantized black space field equation, where black space in motion creates a black hole, and 2 black holes, one is at the top of the donut-shaped magnetic field and one is at the bottom. So as they touch tip to tip, we're going to get a discharge of hydrogen-like plasma on a tremendous scale. Now, some call that the Big Bang that created stars and planets in our solar system. But as we look at this controlled Big Bang within the center area of the blue basketball-shaped Earth, we're looking at a hydrogen-like discharge plasma from infrared, using infrared frequencies. Okay, so these infrared frequencies is called the red rainbow charge. Out of the 7 rainbow circles, right, we got Roy, or red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and indigo, and violet. Those are the 7 rainbow circles of color. Now, each color has a frequency to it, or oscillation. Now, the red light, in which the Earth solidified from, is the infrared spectrum. Okay, so as we see that the same rainbow circles that at the top of the Earth is also being pulled through this donut-shaped magnetic field. Now, that means that if we discover that something is making what we call a magnetic field, then we have changed the astronomical teaching methods in high schools and college. Why? Because we now see that a moving quantized form of black space, when it moves upon itself, it moves black space. And when black space is in motion, we get the creation of stars and lights through this so-called tornado-shaped black hole vortex. So that means then that black space has a higher element to it, in which scientists has not touched on. And so when we look at the donut-shaped magnetic field pulling in black space, it's downward pointing tornado-shaped vortex and upward pointing tornado-shaped vortex. This is the central area of the donut-shaped rotating magnetic field, where Earth is to materialize from in the center of the donut-shaped magnetic field. So as we look at this plasma being manipulated by a quantized moving black space field equation, so that changes the whole ball game, and it gives astronomers a new area or new tool to discover our universe and solar system.